In the next edition of It's About Money, my guest will be Michelle Hosp, and she is the founder of 2020 Reading. Stay tuned for the next edition of It's About Money. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nanette Nokan and thank you for joining us. I am thrilled to have our guest today, Michelle Hosp, who is an expert in education and reading, and she is the founder of 2020 Reading. Michelle, you have a master's degree in the School of Psychology at RIT and your PhD of Human Development from Vanderbilt.
Yes.
So you're well credentialed and have authored many books in education. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Nanette.
So our focus today is about this program that you have, the 2020 Reading, and there's a lot of money issues associated with not being able to read. Now, why is reading so important?
Thank you for that question. It's really true. So reading is one of those critical skills that people need in order to have the keys to the car, the keys to get down the road in whatever career they choose. It's not the only thing, but it is absolutely one of the essential things. So I just want to share some of the critical statistics to get a sense of how reading impacts us, individuals, adults, and students, and then how that impacts earning potential as well. So we know that about 14% of adults in the U.S. right now can't read. 14%.
That's astounding.
It is astounding. And if you think about the impact on not being able to read, not, employment opportunities, and just helping their children, parents who want to be engaged in supporting other members of their family. We know that 21% of the adults actually read below a 5th grade reading level, which is a pretty low reading level. We know that most newspapers are above that. And about 19% of high school graduates can't read.
Oh my gosh.
Right, so when you say, how did they graduate? There tends to be in education something that's called social promotion, and that is where kids show up to school, they're well behaved, teachers don't want to penalize them because they're trying hard, so they promote them. And they promote them based on their age and a social promotion, not based on the skills they have. So the unfortunate part about that is that they end up graduating, but they actually don't have the skills in order to be successful beyond high school. And those numbers tend to remain stable over time. What's interesting, though, is that if you look at the student population, we know that being able to read by the end of 3rd grade is highly predictive of students staying in school and graduating. So kids who can't read by the end of 3rd grade have a 4 to 6 times higher rate of dropping out of school. 6 times are those kids who are also living in poverty. They have more impact and they are more likely to drop out of school. The interesting thing is, out of those kids, they are also, who drop out, they are 63 more likely, 63 times more likely to end up incarcerated over kids who graduate high school. So the impact really ends up adding up for them. And when you look at the kids who are in the juvenile justice system, 85% of them are illiterate.
Oh boy.
So we know that reading by the end of 3rd grade has a large impact. And when you look at that on financial impact for those individuals, we know that kids who don't graduate high school have the highest unemployment rate. And this is based on the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics from 2015, so it's pretty recent information. Their unemployment rate is at 8% for those kids who don't graduate high school. Now, for kids who graduate high school, they actually earn 29 times more than kids who don't graduate, and their unemployment rate drops to 5.4%. So that's just being able to graduate high school. And then it goes off from there. Students who have some college or 42% earn 42% more than students who don't graduate, and their unemployment rate drops to 5%. If students earn an associate's degree, which is typically a 2-year degree, they earn 51% more than students who don't graduate, and their unemployment rate drops to 3.8%. Bachelor's is 93% more than kids who don't graduate, with a 2.8% unemployment rate. So you can see it really dropping drastically. Master's degrees earn 126% more. 126% more
Wow.
than if you don't graduate high school, with an unemployment rate of 2.4. And then those students who go on for a doctorate degree earn 187% more with 1.5% unemployment rate. The other interesting thing about those statistics is that when the economy has a downturn, those students with less education, their unemployment rate goes up. So they get impacted more because they don't have the opportunity to stay in the employment, stay employed. And if you think about that, that all circles back to being able to read by the end of third grade.
Sure, sure.
Because it's such a high predictor of whether kids will stay in school, what their trajectory is going to be, what their earning potential is going to be, if they are not able to read by the end of third grade. There's a saying that that is widely used in education that that up to third grade we are teaching kids how to read. Beyond third grade, they're reading for meaning. So the instruction for getting kids to have basic foundational reading skills moves more into learning.
Right.
And so the assumption is that these kids know how to read.
Sure.
So the instruction that typically happens in school really decreases after third grade because the assumption is kids already have reading skills. And so now they just need to be reading to learn the content.
Sure. So it's in the analogy that you used for the car. It's the key to the car, reading.
Yes.
And if you didn't learn how to read, the car won't move.
The car won't move.
Right.
You don't get
you have to push it
right.
or something. Like
and if you think about your journey, right? So the car represents your journey and where you want to go in life, that you want to have a career, that you want to get down the road, that you want to have a family and take them places. That all depends on being able to drive the car, being able to have those skills to do the things you want to do.
Right, that's amazing. So, so what does now we know the problem, right? It's a terrible problem, and we know that reading is important to have education, and education is the fastest way out of poverty. What does 2020 reading mean?
So 2020 reading actually means we developed a tool that focuses on the essential critical skills for kids to be successful in reading. So 2020 reading is our assessment that is focused, so 2020 representing how do we put tools in teachers' hands that are quick, easy to use, gets them the information so they can give the kid the key faster, so they can get in the car and get down the road, that helps them look at the skills the kid needs to be able to be proficient in reading, and then what they need to teach. So it's that direct link between how do I determine, so if you think about it as a doctor, right? If you go to see the doctor often will give you some screening assessments, right? So they take your blood pressure and they weigh you and they take your temperature, and it gives the physician an overall indication of your general health. So in reading, it's the same thing in academic skills. There are screeners, and our 2020 reading is one of them, that gives you an overall sense of the student's overall health in the area of being able to read words. So when and that's important because we want to know, and you can't read unless you can read words. And words are made up of individual sounds, and sounds are made up of syllables, and there's lots and lots of patterns. So what we wanted to do is look at the most common patterns in words and make sure that we were measuring those, because we know that those patterns show up more frequently in the English language. So if kids understand those patterns and can read those words, then they can move on to be successful in reading. So we want to be able to screen them quickly to see, do they have a problem with word patterns? But just like you would go to the doctor, if you have a high temperature or something, it says, well, there's something wrong, but it doesn't tell you what is wrong. So if they're taking your blood pressure and your blood pressure is high, your doctor may say, oh, your blood pressure is high. We need to give you an additional diagnostic to figure out what is causing that to happen. So 2020 reading has a screening assessment to tell you which word patterns kids are struggling with, but then within each pattern, we look at identifying very discreetly so that educators and tutors and anybody working with a child who's struggling doesn't have to teach them something they already know. They can focus on the things that they need to get them to be able to read more successfully and more quickly.
I see. So it's more holistic rather than just focusing on what they already know. It sounds good, it feels good that you know this. Gotta open it up to the rest of it. Yes, the rest of the reading skills, yeah.
Right,
Yes.
right. And it's essential. So word reading is one of the key foundational skills that all kids need to be able to do. If they can't read words, then they're not able to think about what they're reading. They're not able to make sense of phrases or sentences or connected text or paragraphs or books. And it really limits their ability, not only on an enjoyment level, to be able to read for enjoyment, but to be able to be successful in school. And as we talked about, that trajectory of not being proficient, not being a good reader by the end of third grade really, really impacts them further down the road economically.
So how did you come to develop this? I mean, you know the statistics, but how did you come to develop it? It's amazing.
Yeah, so I've been in education over 20 years, and I was a school psychologist and as a researcher, and one of the things that was striking is that we know that kids need to be able to read words. And when I was working with teachers and parents and other types of tutors in the field, they would say, you know, we have this child who's struggling in reading. You know, can you help us figure it out? And what I quickly discovered is that the tools that are currently available are not very helpful for figuring it out. So we have lots of tools that screen on a broad level. So we have tools that say the child is struggling in reading, or the child is struggling even maybe with reading words. But which patterns of words? And which specific words are they struggling with? So it became very clear to me that there was not something out there that was as diagnostic and specific that would really help educators, teachers, tutors, consultants, really help school systems and parents and kids be able to really target what was needed. There are absolutely assessments out there, and one of the big issues of what's currently out there is that they tend to take a very long time to give. So some of, in fact, I was just having a conversation with a learning center in the area recently, and I asked them, so tell me about what your intake is for kids. You know, what type of assessment do you give? And they described a whole series of assessments that there's nothing wrong with those assessments. But the interesting thing is, one of the comments I said, well, how long does that take? And they said, well, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on what the student can tolerate. It's like, tolerate? So you're taking an individual who's already struggling with something, and then you're going to put them in a situation that's going to be 10 times more frustrating. So what I would say is there has to be a better way to do that. We have to be able to quickly be able to assess students, figure out where they need assistance, and move on to instruction, because every time an educator decides to test a kid, they're not teaching. And just like when we're trying to learn anything, not taking the test is not going to improve our performance. It's actually doing the task and learning the skills. So what we really wanted to focus on was something that could be very quick and efficient for teachers, because we knew that what was out there was already hard. It was taking way too much time, and it wasn't specific. Even though teachers were spending their time giving some of these assessments, the output was often very frustrating and confusing for them. They weren't spending their time teaching, and at the end of it, they didn't have any better information than what they knew in the beginning, was that the kid was struggling with reading. So we really sought to focus very specifically on the solution to that. And so we wanted something that was fast and easy. So 2020 reading, because we are focusing on very discrete specific skills, only takes about 3 to 5 minutes per kid.
Oh, wow.
So when you talk about...
Instead of an hour and a half.
No, so when you talk... Exactly. So just think about the benefit of that. You could take a classroom of 20 students, and in an hour you could actually screen all of them and have good information. And we'll look at some of that information of what teachers and educators would be looking at.
That's good.
We wanted it to be helpful. We wanted it to really focus on what are the critical skills kids need to learn. There's lots of stuff, but we know when it comes to reading words, there are lots of patterns that are commonly used. They are repeated. They are of super high frequency in the English language. And those are the patterns that kids are going to see over and over again when they go to read words. So it makes sense to teach those patterns.
Sure, feel good about it if you're learning it. Like, wow, this is working.
Right, because then you're going to see more and more words with that pattern. And you're going to have the key, you're going to have the focus to be able to unlock how to read that word, and you will see yourself growing as a reader. We also wanted it to be pain-free, right? We wanted it to be easy enough where it was easy for whoever is administering the assessment. So it might be a tutor, it could be someone who's consulting with the school, it could be a teacher, whoever is going to be working with the child. We wanted it to be very easy for them to administer and understand.
Sure.
And we wanted it to be an easy, positive experience for the kid.
Yes.
And all of that needs to happen and get really good, reliable, excellent data. We've tested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids on the assessment. So we also, the other thing that I will say about a lot of assessments that are out there are a lot. And one of the things as a researcher that I'm very concerned with is it reliable and valid? Do we know that it's actually measuring word reading? Do we know that the kid's going to perform similarly on this test if we give it again for reliability?
Sure.
So we've tested hundreds of kids and we have excellent data on the assessment too to know that it is a reliable and valid assessment, not only to screen kids, but it also get much more specific information as well.
That's great. That's great. We're going to take a quick break. My guest is Michelle Hosp, and she is the founder of 2020 Reading. We'll be right back.
I know he's bright.
Why is it so hard for me?
He's
I'm
just
trying
gotta
as
try a
hard
little
as
harder.
I can.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. Go to understood.org, a free online resource with support and tools to help your child thrive.
And we're back. I'm Nanette Noca, and it's about money. My guest today is Michelle Hosp, and she's the founder of 2020 Reading. Thanks again for being here, Michelle.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit more about 2020 Reading. What grade levels is it used, and so on?
Yeah, so as we talked about before, we know that third grade is a trigger, right? That kids often have to have a lot of reading skills under their belt by third grade. So we developed 2020 Reading to be used with first graders. And then the majority of schools that are using it right now are using it in elementary grades. But what I will say is that it is an assessment that could be used with any student who's struggling. So if I'm a high school student and I am struggling with reading words, this is still an assessment that applies because it is an assessment that focuses on foundational reading skills, which is not attached to an age. There are clear expectations that kids will have these skills by the end of third grade, but it could be used with any student who is struggling in the area of reading. So it would be helpful if we could look at maybe some of the graphs and the information that help explain the data.
Okay.
So the first graph is looking at this would be an example of what a whole grade would see. So this is a second grade classroom, and what we're looking at is a whole bunch of word reading skills along the bottom, and this particular grade tested students 4 times across the year. So what they wanted to see is are our students getting better in all of these areas of word reading? So what you would expect to see is, and they're also listed in increments of easier to more difficult. Okay? So the easier skills are down here, the more difficult skills are here. We would expect to see more green. Green means that the kids have the skill.
So
yellow.
Okay, so on the left side of the graph would be the easier.
Easier.
Okay, got it.
Yep, easier word reading skills. Yellow would be that the students are starting to learn the skill, and red would be that they don't yet have the skill.
Got it.
So for the easier skills, we would expect to see more green and yellow, and then for the harder skills, we wouldn't expect to see as much.
Okay.
So this helps a system, whether you're working in a tutoring system, whether you're working in a school system. The question that this helps you answer is, are our students getting better across the year on critical word reading skills?
Got it.
It allows you to look at how is everyone doing? So the interesting thing is what happened with this data when we showed it to the school. Again, this was a second grade classroom. Down here we have more complex word reading patterns. So the questions they started asking themselves were, did we teach that? Is that in our curriculum? Did we cover those skills? What they found is when they went back and they looked at their curriculum, they were not getting to those lessons. They were, which often happens in school. Things happen, there's lots of interruptions during breaks. And so you have your intention of, I'm going to teach all of these skills by the end of the year. And often what we find is sometimes some skills don't get taught because we don't stay on pace. So after looking at this data, they actually came up with a pacing guide. And they said, we can fix this problem. We can have clear marks throughout the year of when we're going to get through all of these lessons so that we no longer have this problem.
So we reduce the red area.
Reduce the red area.
Right.
Without this information, there's no way they'd be able to do that. There's nothing else out there that would give them the data as it looks like here.
And everyone knows what green, yellow, and
everybody knows, right, that speaks to the ease, right? What we wanted to say is, look, do you understand green? And we can also see within a category, are they getting better? Is it stepping up? Is it stepping up? Is it stepping up?
Nice. Yeah.
So it was very easy for them to read. What's really exciting is, while that's helpful for a grade to look at and be able to work together as a system, right? So this could be a tutoring center, this could be a school district, looking at how the system's functioning. But then we also have a classroom report. And what's nice about this is this takes a teacher's entire class across the skill areas, and what they get to ask first is, are there any skills that the majority of my kids are missing? So they would look at the bottom and they would say, we have these 3 skills that at least 60% of my class doesn't have. So from an efficiency standpoint, if I'm an instructor, I'm going to say, I'm just going to teach everybody. I have enough students who need help that I'm not going to do it individually. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to figure out where my greatest need is, and from a resource perspective, I can then go and teach my whole class. So it's very helpful for the individual teacher to think that way. The other thing it does, then I get to look at who needs help. So it's typically about the bottom 20% of a class will typically be struggling. And you see that here. You see lots of kids with yellow and red in specific skills. So the teacher then gets to say, or the educator or tutor or whoever's working with this group gets to say, are there similar skills that these students need to be taught? Could I group them easily? And really efficiently use my time to figure out which kids need to be getting which instruction. The other thing is, we often hear, well, it doesn't help for kids who are way at the top. Well, it does, because it also tells me I have kids that are way beyond everybody else. So as a teacher, I could say, I want to accelerate these kids. I want to give them extension lessons. I want to give them opportunities to go because they're already there. So it allows you to look at all of your students and not just focus on those that are struggling, which is beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
It also removes any preconceived notions. Just sometimes teachers may not know just by talking to the kids how deep their reading levels are, right?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Nanette, because one of the groups of students who is often under-identified are shy, quiet girls. Because they sit quietly in class and they pay attention, and the teacher assumes that they're there. But unless they have really good data to understand if the student has the skill or not, and this is the great thing about reading. It can be taught. It's a skill. It's not saying, oh, the student's in trouble, so, well, they're a bad reader, so they're a bad reader, and that's just their lot in life. We know that there are really good instructional strategies to fix this. And we also know that through science, using brain scans, they show that you can take a student who is a good reader and you can take a student who struggles in reading, and their brain lights up in different places. Here's the great thing. When you give them good instruction and teach them the skills, their brains look the same. So we know that it's a problem that can be fixed. So from that, a teacher would then get a individual student report. So this is just taking the classroom report and saying, so what does an individual student look like? So this will tell you, I'm not going to worry about these skills. these skills are probably okay, but there looks like there might be a problem with these.
So it's again green, yellow, and red. The problem areas are the red.
Exactly. Yeah. Green, don't worry about it. Yellow, I'm not as concerned. Red, this is probably something I need to pay attention to. So what the issue is it tells you these two skills are the skills that this student is struggling with the most. So this is where I would want to intervene as an educator, as a tutor, as anyone who's concerned about this student's reading. So the beautiful thing is lots of times the assessments that we have out there, this is as far as you would get. You would say, I'm struggling and I might be struggling in these patterns, and that's it. There is nothing out there except 2020 reading that will then say, yeah, but which in those categories, what specifically is a student struggling with? So that's where we have the individual diagnostic graph, and that's where a teacher, so the example here is short vowels. You would think that would be simple. There's 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U.
Sure.
They each have a very clear sound that they each make, but it is a very common pattern that students struggle with. So what we have is we know this would tell you, yes, they might be struggling with those patterns, short vowels, but which short vowels?
Sure, right.
So if I'm a tutor, if I'm a teacher, if I'm a consultant, and I want to be able to have the most significant impact to help the kid, I want to know, do they know A, E, I, O, U equally? No, and often what we find is that there are patterns that tend to hold together. I and E are very difficult because it's the I and the E. They sound a lot alike. Kids often confuse them. But if I'm a teacher and the kid knows these other sounds, I don't want to spend my time.
Sure.
If I'm tutoring this kid, I don't want to spend my time on something they already know. So it allows me to really drill down very quickly so that I can have the greatest impact for the kid. And there is nothing else out there that currently does that.
Yeah, that's great. So how do people get in touch with you to do this? Because I'm thinking of like, wow, this is really great. And we have so much to talk about in such a short amount of time. How do people get to do this?
Yes, so if people are interested in getting in touch with us, we do have an email address. It's info@2020reading.com. They can contact us there for more information. And what I will say is that on the horizon for us, we currently are working with a couple different schools in a couple different states. The interesting thing is one of the first schools we worked with, I went in and I said, let's just try it out with a couple of your kids. And the teachers, so what I asked them to do is I said, just assess 5 kids. I came back a month later and they had tested everybody in their class. And I said, why did you do that? And they said, because it was so easy and the information was so great. We wanted to test everybody. And I said, okay, well then let's wait and let's test them again, at the end of January. Well, they tested them an additional time. They just kept saying, but this information is so important. And what's really interesting about that group is that they weren't necessarily super excited. They do a lot of testing, they do a lot of other things, and it was really me as a researcher saying, I really would like you to try this out, give me some feedback. So they used it, found super high value in it, and at the end of their grade, at the end of the school year, they went and tested all of the kids in the previous grade that they were going to be getting in the fall because they wanted to know what specific word reading skills were they going to have to teach.
How exciting.
It was amazing. Our next step is to put it online so that it is much more fast and efficient for people to use. We also are really interested, one of the things that teachers ask us all the time, and educators and tutors and consultants and anybody who would be evaluating and assessing kids is, so now that I know what skills they need, do you have anything for me? Right? What's the fix? What's the medicine?
Sure, yes.
2020 reading allows all of those entities to really focus and figure out how can people use the products, the educational tools they already have in their toolbox better by having better information about what kids need and struggle with.
That's great, just putting the right shape and the right tool,
Right.
putting it together.
There's already amazing tools out there, but there's not a focus like 2020 reading does to be able to say, which of the tools in my toolbox should I take out today? So we really think that we could enhance what publishers do, we could enhance what other tutoring centers are doing, what school districts are doing, absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. This has been a very exciting program, and best wishes and congratulations, and thank you for putting this together.
Yes.
I mean, hopefully our reading rates and statistics will improve. You know, it's just
It's
really,
critical.
Yeah, very, very much so. So thank you so much, Michelle
you.
Hosp, 2020 reading. And thank you, our guests, for joining us today. I'm Nanette Nokan. Until next time, it's about money.